350 people celebrated my sister's wedding, but I watched from outside because I was kicked out when my father saw me talking to the waiter who was my ex-husband Michael, who he didn't know was working the event to pay our kids' child support. When my sister came back from the bathroom and saw me crying in the parking lot, she demanded to know what happened, and our father said in front of everyone that whores who get divorced don't deserve to be at sacred family events. The ballroom went silent. Crystal chandeliers caught the horror on 350 faces as my father's words echoed off marble walls. My sister Elena's white dress seemed to glow brighter in that terrible stillness, her bouquet of white roses trembling in her hands. Michael had already disappeared through the kitchen doors, his waiter's uniform vanishing into the steam and chaos of the catering station. I stood there in my navy bridesmaid dress, the one Elena had chosen because she said it made my eyes look like the ocean, and watched my father's face twist with satisfaction. He'd been waiting 6 years to publicly shame me. He'd finally found his perfect stage. But what my father didn't see was the USB drive I'd slipped into my clutch 5 minutes earlier. What he didn't know was that I'd spent 3 months working as a temporary assistant at his accounting firm, filing papers, making coffee, being invisible. What none of them understood was that the broken, crying woman in the parking lot had stopped existing the moment I discovered where my father had hidden my inheritance from my mother's life insurance, the $200,000 that was legally mine. The money he'd told me didn't exist, while I worked 3 jobs to keep my kids fed after the divorce. I was 15 when my mother died, leaving me as the beneficiary of her policy. My father became the trustee until I turned 18. On my 18th birthday, he handed me a sympathy card and said the insurance company had gone bankrupt. I believed him because I was stupid and grieving, and he was my father. For 16 years, I believed that lie. I struggled through community college while Elena got her private university paid in full. I ate ramen while Elena posted pictures of her study abroad in Paris. I married Michael at 22 because I was pregnant and terrified, and we divorced at 28 because poverty had turned us into strangers who fought over grocery receipts. Michael was a good man who became a ghost of himself under the weight of our bills. We'd met in college where he was studying engineering, but he dropped out when our twins came early and the medical bills started piling up. He worked construction, then retail, then anything that would hire him. The divorce wasn't angry. It was exhausted. We'd simply run out of everything except love for our kids. And even that felt thin sometimes when we couldn't afford their school supplies. My father had smiled at the divorce papers. Elena had hugged me and whispered that I'd always been the strong one, that I'd survived this like I'd survived everything else. Neither of them offered money. Neither of them asked if I needed help. But 6 months ago, I'd gone to my father's firm to drop off his forgotten phone. His secretary was at lunch. His office door was open, and there, on his computer screen, was a spreadsheet labeled Martinez Family Trust Accounts. My name was right there, next to a current balance of $372,000. The original $200,000 had been growing interest for 16 years while I'd been drowning. I'd stood in that doorway for 30 seconds, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped his phone. Then I'd closed the door quietly, left the phone with the receptionist, and gone home to plan. Not to cry, not to confront, but to plan. Because in that moment, I'd understood something crucial about my father. He'd kept that money not because he needed it, but because controlling me was more valuable to him than any dollar amount. He'd wanted me desperate. He'd wanted me dependent. He'd wanted me small. So I'd made myself smaller. I'd applied to his firm as a temp through an agency, using my married name Thompson instead of Martinez. I'd worn glasses I didn't need and pulled my hair into a tight bun. I'd kept my head down and my mouth shut while I learned everything about his business, where he kept his files, how he structured his accounts, who his clients were, and what secrets they trusted him with. My father had walked past me 23 times in 3 months and never once recognized his own daughter. The week before Elena's wedding, I'd worked late and copied every file I needed. Bank statements showing the trust account, emails where he'd discussed managing Rebecca's expectations with his lawyer, letters from the insurance company sent to our home address, letters I'd never seen, letters he'd intercepted and hidden, and most damning of all, a journal he kept in his locked desk drawer where he'd written, with disturbing pride, about how keeping me poor had ensured I'd never become uppity like her mother. My mother had been a teacher who'd criticized his drinking. She'd died in a car accident when he'd insisted on driving home from a party despite being drunk. No charges were filed because his brother was a cop. My father had framed her death as a tragedy we'd survived together, but his journal told a different story. He'd written that her death had freed him, that raising me alone had been inconvenient but necessary to maintain his image, that he'd always planned to keep my inheritance as compensation for his suffering. Now, in the parking lot of Elena's wedding venue, I let myself cry for exactly 60 more seconds. I let my father's guests whisper and stare. I let Elena rush toward me, her wedding day ruined by our father's cruelty. And then I stopped crying, dried my eyes, and looked my father directly in the face. "You're right," I said clearly. "I don't belong at sacred family events. I'll go." My father's smile was vicious. Elena grabbed my arm, her own tears starting, demanding I stay. But I hugged her, whispered that I loved her and wanted her to enjoy her day, and walked to my car. Behind me, I heard my father telling everyone to get back to celebrating, that I'd always been dramatic, that Elena deserved better than a scene. I sat in my car and didn't drive away. Instead, I opened my laptop and uploaded every file to 3 different cloud servers. Then I sent a carefully worded email to the State Bar Association, the IRS, and 5 of my father's biggest clients. The subject line was simple: fiduciary fraud and trust account misappropriation by Robert Martinez, CPA. I attached everything. Then I drove to the police station and filed a report for theft and fraud. The detective who took my statement was a woman in her 50s who looked at my evidence and said, "Honey, this is enough to put him away." I told her I didn't want him put away. I wanted my money back, with interest and penalties. I wanted his CPA license revoked. I wanted every client to know what he'd done. She'd nodded slowly and said, "We can make that happen." My phone rang 47 times that night. Elena called crying, begging me to explain what was happening, because Dad had just been arrested at her wedding reception. Her new husband's family had witnessed my father being led out in handcuffs, while 350 guests watched in stunned silence. The beautiful reception she'd planned for months had ended with police cars and photographers and her father screaming about betrayal. I didn't answer. I was too busy meeting with the lawyer I'd hired, the one who specialized in trust fraud and had smiled like a shark when she'd seen my evidence. The news broke on Monday morning. Local CPA Robert Martinez, pillar of the community and deacon at St. Michael's Catholic Church, had been charged with embezzlement, fiduciary fraud, and theft exceeding $200,000. The victim was his own daughter. Channel 7. News ran the story at 6 a.m., complete with my father's mugshot and footage of him being escorted from Elena's wedding in handcuffs. My phone exploded. Texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, asking if it was true, if I was okay, if I needed anything. The same relatives who'd watched me struggle for 16 years and never once offered help. I blocked every number I didn't recognize and went to work at the grocery store where I'd been a cashier for the past 4 years. My manager, Jerry, took one look at my face and told me to take the week off with pay. I told him I needed the distraction. He squeezed my shoulder and put me on the self-checkout station where I wouldn't have to talk to people. Michael showed up during my lunch break. He'd seen the news at the restaurant where he'd picked up extra morning shifts bussing tables before his evening catering gigs. He looked older than 35, his face lined with exhaustion and something else. Guilt, maybe. "Becca, I had no idea," he said, sitting across from me in the break room. "All those years I thought we were just unlucky. I thought we were both just bad with money." "We were unlucky," I said, unwrapping my sandwich. "We were unlucky to have my father in our lives. The kids have been asking questions. They saw something online about their grandfather." Michael ran his hands through his hair. "What do I tell them?" "Tell them the truth. Their grandfather is a thief who stole from their mother, and that's why we struggled." I took a bite of my sandwich, suddenly ravenous. "Tell them we're going to be okay now." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For not being stronger. For not fighting harder. For giving up on us." "You didn't give up. We both just ran out of road." I finished my sandwich and stood. "I need to get back to work." "Becca, wait." He grabbed my hand. "If you get that money back, if this works out, I want you to know I never divorced you because I stopped loving you. I divorced you because I couldn't stand watching you suffer anymore and knowing it was my fault." "It wasn't your fault, Michael. It was his." I pulled my hand away gently. We were kids playing at being adults, and my father made sure we'd never win that game. Elena called that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. She called 6 more times. On the 7th call, I answered. "How could you?" she screamed. "How could you ruin my wedding? How could you have Dad arrested at my reception? Everyone is talking about it. Marcus's parents are mortified. I'm mortified." "I didn't ruin your wedding, Elena. Dad did that when he called me a whore in front of 350 people. He was angry. You were talking to your ex-husband at my wedding." "I was talking to a waiter. I was talking to the father of my children who was working to pay child support because we've been poor our entire adult lives while you studied in Paris. Silence. Then quieter. That's not fair. You're right. It's not fair. None of this is fair. But it's true. I sat down on my couch, suddenly exhausted. Did you know about the money, Elena? What money? Mom's life insurance. The $200,000 Dad told me didn't exist. Did you know he had it? Another silence. Longer this time. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I can hear it in your voice. You knew. I didn't know the amount, she whispered. I found some papers when I was home from college one summer. I asked Dad about them and he said it was complicated. That Mom had wanted him to manage it because you weren't responsible with money. He said you'd blow it on stupid things if you knew about it. I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. And you believed him? You watched me work 3 jobs and believed I was just irresponsible? I thought maybe you were bad at budgeting. I thought maybe the divorce had messed you up financially. I don't know, Becca. I was 20 years old and Dad said not to mention it to you because it would just make you feel bad. So you said nothing for 6 years. You said nothing while I fed my kids spaghetti 5 nights a week. You said nothing while Michael and I destroyed each other trying to survive. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the parking lot of my apartment complex. A child's bike lay on its side near the dumpster. You said nothing at all. I'm sorry, Elena sobbed. I'm so sorry. I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed back. But he's our father, and I wanted to believe him. He's not my father anymore. He stopped being my father the day he stole from me. I watched a woman carry groceries up the stairs, struggling with too many bags and a baby on her hip. That had been me for years. That would never be me again. Your wedding looked beautiful, by the way. The photos online were lovely. Don't do that. Don't be cold. You're my sister. I am your sister. That's why I'm telling you the truth now. Dad is going to prison, Elena. The evidence is overwhelming. The state bar is revoking his license. The IRS is auditing him going back 15 years. His clients are suing him. Everything he built is coming down and he earned every second of it. He's still our father. He's still your father. He stopped being mine a long time ago. I just didn't know it until I saw my name on that spreadsheet. I hung up before she could respond. My lawyer called an hour later. Margaret Chen was 60 years old, had been practicing trust and estate law for 35 years, and had taken my case on a contingency basis because, in her words, your father is the kind of scum that makes my profession look bad. The prosecutor is offering a deal, Margaret said. Your father pleads guilty to all charges, agrees to full restitution plus interest and penalties, surrenders his CPA license permanently, and serves 18 months in minimum security. In exchange, they drop the felony embezzlement to misdemeanor fraud. What happens if he doesn't take it? He goes to trial, loses, and spends 5 to 7 years in actual prison. Plus, we still get our money in the civil case, but it takes longer. Margaret's voice was crisp and professional. The prosecutor thinks he'll take it. His lawyer knows the evidence is airtight. How much money are we talking about with interest and penalties? $562,000. Plus my fees come out of his pocket, not yours, as part of the settlement. I sat down hard on my couch. $500,000. Enough to pay off every debt Michael and I had accumulated. Enough to put our kids through college. Enough to never feel that gnawing panic about how to pay for groceries. Tell the prosecutor we have a deal on one condition, I said slowly. My father has to make a public apology, in writing, admitting what he did and why he did it. And it has to be published in the local paper. That's not standard. Make it standard. Tell his lawyer that's the only way I agree to the misdemeanor reduction. Otherwise, we go to trial and I testify about every single time he let me suffer while he hoarded my money. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, sharp and approving. I'll call them right now. My father's apology ran in the Sunday paper, a full quarter page that his lawyer had clearly written, but that he'd been forced to sign. It detailed the trust account, the life insurance money, and his deliberate deception. It acknowledged the harm he'd caused me and my children. It stopped short of explaining why he'd done it, but the facts were damning enough. The morning it published, I drove to my father's house. He was out on bail, living alone since Elena had uninvited him from staying with her and Marcus. The house looked the same as always. Pristine lawn, fresh paint, expensive cars in the driveway, all paid for, I now knew, with money that should have been mine. I didn't knock. I stood on his porch and called his cell phone. Through the window, I watched him look at the caller ID and hesitate. Then he answered. "What do you want, Rebecca?" "I want you to know that I forgive you," I said softly. His face appeared in the window, confused and hopeful. "You do?" "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "I just wanted to see if you were stupid enough to believe me. Take the deal, Dad. Go to prison for 18 months, pay me my money, and then spend the rest of your life knowing that your daughter was smarter than you." I hung up and walked back to my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the window, the phone still pressed to his ear. He took the deal that afternoon. The money hit my account on a Thursday morning in October, 6 months after Elena's wedding. $562,000 minus Margaret's 30% contingency fee, leaving me with $393,400. I sat in my car outside the bank and stared at the balance on my phone until the numbers stopped feeling real. My first call was to Michael. He was at work. I could hear the clatter of dishes and shouted orders in the background. "I got the money," I said. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "All of it?" "All of it. Plus interest, minus the lawyer's cut." I took a deep breath. "Michael, I want to pay off your debts. The credit cards, the medical bills, everything. I want our kids to grow up without watching you kill yourself working 3 jobs. Becca, I can't let you do that. You can't stop me. Those debts are from us, from when we were married, from when we were trying to survive. We both suffered because of what my father did. This money should have been ours together. And even though we're not married anymore, you deserve to be free of it." I heard him step away from the noise, heard his breathing get rough. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come with me tomorrow to meet with a financial advisor. Say you'll let me do this one thing to fix what my father broke. I wiped my eyes. We can't go back, but we can go forward without drowning. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, yes." My second call was to my landlord. I paid off the 6 months of back rent I owed and gave notice that I'd be moving. My third call was to a real estate agent. I wanted to buy a house. Nothing fancy, but something with a yard where my kids could play without me worrying about disturbing neighbors. Something that was ours. Elena called that night. We hadn't spoken since the day after the arrest, despite her dozens of messages that I'd left unanswered. "I saw Dad today," she said without preamble. "He reports to prison next week." I know. I was packing boxes in my living room, wrapping dishes in newspaper. "He's lost everything, Becca. The business is gone. He had to sell the house. Most of his friends won't speak to him. The church asked him to step down from the deacon board." "Good. That's all you have to say? Good?" I set down the dish I was wrapping. "What do you want me to say, Elena? That I feel bad for him? That I regret exposing what he did? I want you to show some compassion. He's still our father. He made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is saying something hurtful in an argument. What Dad did was calculated theft that lasted 16 years. He looked me in the eye hundreds of times while I struggled and chose to let me suffer. That's not a mistake. That's cruelty. He said he was going to give you the money eventually. He said he was waiting until you were more mature." I laughed, cold and sharp. I was 34 years old, Elena. I had 2 children and had been divorced for 6 years. When exactly would I have been mature enough? When I was 50, 60? Or was he planning to keep it until he died and leave it to you? Silence. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. "His will left everything to you, didn't it? Including my trust fund." "I didn't know," Elena said, but her voice was weak. "I swear I didn't know that's what he was planning. But you suspected. You must have wondered where your inheritance was coming from. Dad's business did well, but not well enough to pay for your private school and your university and your study abroad and your wedding. Not while I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment with my 2 kids and working at a grocery store. You never asked for help. You never said you were struggling that badly. I shouldn't have had to ask. You should have seen it. You should have questioned why I always declined family dinners because I couldn't afford to go out. You should have wondered why my kids wore thrift store clothes while yours will wear whatever they want. You should have cared enough to look. That's not fair, Becca. Stop saying that. Stop telling me what's fair when you've never had to choose between electricity and groceries. When you've never had to tell your kids they can't do soccer because you can't afford the cleats. When you've never had to decide which bill to skip so you can buy birthday presents." I was shouting now, years of swallowed rage finally breaking free. "You got to be the golden child while I got to be the cautionary tale. You got to live the life that should have been mine. And you want to lecture me about fairness? I didn't ask for any of that. No, but you took it. You took it, and you enjoyed it, and you never questioned it. And when you found out the truth, you said nothing because it was easier to believe I was just bad with money than to admit Dad was a monster. Elena was crying. I felt nothing. I'm buying a house, I said, my voice steady again. In a good school district, with a yard and a garage and enough bedrooms that my kids don't have to share anymore. I'm taking Michael to pay off his debts so he can go back to school and finish his engineering degree. I'm putting money away for the twins' college. I'm building the life I should have had 16 years ago. And where do I fit in that life? I don't know yet. That's up to you. I started wrapping dishes again, the newspaper crinkling in my hands. You can decide if you want to be my sister or Dad's daughter. You can decide if you want to acknowledge what happened or keep pretending it was all just a misunderstanding. But I'm done making myself small to make either of you comfortable. I love you, Elena whispered. I know, but love isn't enough. Not anymore. I hung up before she could respond. The house I bought was a 3-bedroom ranch on half an acre, 20 minutes from the twins' school. It had hardwood floors and a renovated kitchen and a backyard with an old oak tree perfect for a tire swing. The day we moved in, my kids ran through every room screaming with joy while Michael helped me unpack boxes. This doesn't feel real, I said, watching my daughter Emma spin in circles in her new bedroom. It's real, Michael said. You made it real. That night, after the kids were asleep in their own rooms for the first time in their lives, I sat on my new back porch and cried. Not sad tears, not angry tears, but something deeper. Relief, maybe. Or grief for all the years I'd lost. Or fury that it had taken so long to get here. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hope you're happy now. You've destroyed our family. My father. Messaging from his last night of freedom before reporting to prison. I blocked the number and deleted the message. 3 days later, I got a call from Margaret Chen. Your father's lawyer is asking if you'd be willing to write a letter to the judge, a character reference supporting a reduced sentence. Absolutely not. That's what I told him. But I wanted to give you the option. Margaret, if the judge asks my opinion, tell them to give him the maximum sentence allowed. Tell them he earned every single day. She laughed. I'll pass that along. My father reported to FCI Morgantown on November 3rd. 18 months in minimum security, eligible for early release after 12 months with good behavior. Elena sent me a photo of herself outside the prison after dropping him off. Her face was blotchy from crying, her eyes red. The text accompanying it read, I hope this makes you feel better. I didn't respond, but I did feel better. Not because my father was suffering. That was just a side effect. I felt better because for the first time in 16 years, I wasn't drowning. I was breathing. I was building. I was becoming the person I should have been all along. Michael enrolled at the community college in January, taking night classes in engineering while working part-time during the day. The twins joined soccer and art classes. I got promoted to assistant manager at the grocery store and started taking online business courses. We weren't rich, but we were stable. We were safe. And every month when I paid my mortgage and my utilities and my kids' activity fees, I thought about my father sitting in his prison cell and felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no regret, no second thoughts. Just the quiet satisfaction of a debt finally paid. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March, 8 months into my father's sentence. My cousin Teresa, who I hadn't spoken to in years, called me at work. Becca, I need to talk to you about your dad. I stepped into the break room, away from customers. What about him? He's been telling everyone in the family that you're refusing to let him have a relationship with his grandchildren, that you've poisoned them against him, that you're keeping them from visiting him in prison? I laughed, sharp and bitter. My kids don't even know he's in prison. They think he moved away for work. They're 9 years old, Teresa. Why would I bring them to a federal correctional facility? That's what I figured. But Aunt Marie is organizing a family meeting. She wants everyone to talk about healing and forgiveness. She's invited Elena and Marcus, your dad's brothers, some cousins. She specifically asked for you to come. When is this meeting? Sunday afternoon at her house, 2 o'clock. Tell Aunt Marie I'll be there. Teresa was quiet for a moment. Becca, I don't think you should go. They're going to ambush you. They're going to try to pressure you into forgiving him. I know. That's why I'm going. Sunday came cold and gray, threatening rain. I dressed carefully, jeans and a nice sweater, nothing too formal or too casual. I wanted to look like someone who had her life together, someone who couldn't be bullied or manipulated. Aunt Marie's house was full when I arrived. 15 people crammed into her living room, balanced on couches and chairs and folding seats brought in from the garage. Elena sat next to Marcus, her face carefully neutral. My father's 2 brothers, Uncle Tom and Uncle Joe, stood near the fireplace, Various cousins I barely knew occupied the remaining spaces. The conversation died when I walked in. "Rebecca," Aunt Marie said, standing. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." I remained standing. "I'd rather hear what this is about first." Aunt Marie exchanged glances with Uncle Tom. "We're concerned about you, dear, about the choices you've been making. About the way you've treated your father, the way I've treated my father," I repeated slowly. "You mean the way I reported him for stealing $500,000 from me? It's more complicated than that," Uncle Joe said. "Bobby made some mistakes with the paperwork, but he was trying to protect you. He was trying to make sure you didn't make bad financial decisions. By stealing my inheritance and letting me live in poverty for 16 years? You weren't in poverty," Aunt Marie said quickly. "You had a job. You had an apartment. I had 3 jobs. I had an apartment I could barely afford. I fed my children spaghetti 5 nights a week because I couldn't afford anything else. My ex-husband destroyed his health working himself to death trying to keep us afloat, all while my father sat on my money and watched me suffer." "He's still your father," Elena said quietly. "He made mistakes, but he's suffering now. He's lost everything. His business, his reputation, his freedom. Isn't that enough?" I turned to look at her. Is it enough? Let's see. He stole 16 years of my life. He stole my ability to finish college without debt. He stole my marriage because Michael and I couldn't survive the stress of poverty. He stole my children's childhood because they grew up watching their mother cry over bills. He stole my dignity every time he let me beg for help I didn't know I shouldn't have needed. So no, Elena. 18 months in minimum security is not enough. It's not even close. This is exactly what we're talking about, Uncle Tom said, his voice hard. This anger, this bitterness. It's eating you alive, Rebecca. You need to forgive him so you can move on. I have moved on. I bought a house. I'm building a life. My kids are happy and stable. I'm moving on just fine without forgiving him. But you're destroying the family, Aunt Marie said, her eyes filling with tears. Bobby is my brother. I've known him my whole life. He's not a bad man. He just made some poor choices. For 16 years? He made poor choices every single day for 16 years? That's not poor choices, Aunt Marie. That's character. I looked around the room at all these people who'd watched me struggle and said nothing. Where were all of you when I was poor? Where were you when I was working 3 jobs? Where were you when I couldn't afford to bring my kids to family Christmas because I couldn't afford presents? Where was this family then? Silence. That's what I thought. You didn't care when I was suffering. You only care now that Dad is facing consequences. I picked up my purse. This meeting is over. Wait, Elena stood up. Please, Becca, just listen. Dad wants to see his grandchildren. He wants to apologize to them personally. He wants to be part of their lives. My children don't know him. They've met him maybe a dozen times total because he never wanted to visit my tiny apartment in the bad part of town. He didn't want to acknowledge them while they were wearing secondhand clothes and living proof of my failures. But now that I have money, now that I've built something, he wants to play grandpa? They're still his grandchildren. No, they're my children, and I decide who gets access to them. And my decision is that a man who stole from their mother, who watched them suffer, who called me a whore in front of 350 people at your wedding, doesn't get the privilege of their presence. Marcus spoke for the first time. This isn't healthy, Rebecca. Holding on to anger like this. It's going to hurt you more than it hurts him. I turned to him. This man I barely knew who'd married my sister. You're right. Anger isn't healthy. You know what else isn't healthy? Being robbed by your own father. Being abandoned by your family. Being told that forgiveness is more important than justice. I'm not holding on to anger, Marcus. I'm holding on to truth. And the truth is that my father is a thief and a liar who deserves everything that's happened to him. Even if that's true, Teresa said carefully, is this the hill you want to die on? Is it worth losing your entire family? I looked at her for a long moment. What family? The family that watched me struggle? The family that knew Dad had my money and said nothing? The family that's more concerned with appearances than with what's right? I shook my head. I already lost my family. I lost it when I was 15 years old and my father decided my inheritance was his to keep. I'm just acknowledging that loss now. I walked toward the door. Elena called after me. Becca, please, don't leave like this. Can't we find some middle ground? Can't you at least write him a letter or something? I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. You want me to find middle ground? Here's my middle ground. I'll write Dad a letter. I'll tell him exactly how I feel. And then I'll read it out loud to everyone here so you can all understand exactly why forgiveness isn't happening. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. I'd written this letter 3 months ago and saved it, knowing someday I'd need it. Dear Dad, I read, my voice steady. You asked Elena to arrange for me to forgive you. You told her you made mistakes and you're sorry. But sorry isn't magic. Sorry doesn't erase 16 years of deliberate cruelty. Sorry doesn't give me back my 20s or my marriage or my children's sense of security. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Every morning you woke up and chose to let me struggle. Every time I mentioned being short on rent or needing help with bills, you chose to say nothing about the money that was legally mine. You chose to watch me work myself to exhaustion rather than admit what you'd done. Those weren't mistakes. That was malice. I looked up. The room was silent. Elena was crying. You want me to bring your grandchildren to visit you in prison? You want them to know you? Here's what I'd have to tell them. Kids, this is your grandfather. He's in prison because he stole from your mother. He's the reason we were poor. He's the reason Dad had to work 3 jobs and why we couldn't afford birthday parties or Christmas presents. He's the reason you wore secondhand clothes and why we lived in that tiny apartment. He watched you suffer and did nothing because he valued control more than he valued us. Is that the relationship you want with them, Dad? Is that the legacy you want? I scrolled down. You stole my mother's final gift to me. The money she worked her entire life to leave me. The security she wanted me to have. You took it and used it as a weapon to keep me small. You didn't protect me. You didn't guide me. You didn't love me. You controlled me. And when I finally escaped that control, you called me a whore in front of hundreds of people because cruelty was the only power you had left. I locked my phone, so no, Dad. I won't bring you your grandchildren. I won't write you supportive letters. I won't visit you. I won't forgive you. I'll raise my kids to be good people despite you, not because of you. I'll build the life you tried to destroy, and I'll do it all without you because you don't deserve to witness it. Uncle Tom stood up. You need to leave. Right now. I was already leaving. I opened the door. But before I go, I want all of you to understand something. I'm not bitter. I'm not eaten up with anger. I'm free. For the first time in my life, I'm completely free of him. And that freedom is worth more than any relationship with people who think forgiveness matters more than justice. I left Aunt Marie's house and drove straight to Michael's apartment. He was studying at his kitchen table, textbooks spread around him. He looked up when I knocked. How'd it go? Exactly as expected. They want me to forgive him and bring the kids to visit him in prison. And you said? I said no. I said no to all of it. I sat down across from him. Michael, I need you to understand something. My father is never going to be part of our kids' lives. Never. If that's going to be a problem, tell me now. He reached across the table and took my hand. It's not a problem. I've been watching you become yourself again these past few months. Watching you stand up straight instead of hunching like you're expecting a blow. I don't want him anywhere near that. Near you or the kids. Even if it means the entire family turns against me, especially if it means that. Family isn't just blood, Becca. It's the people who show up. And they never showed up for you. I squeezed his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me for having your back. That's just what decent people do. That night, Elena called. I didn't answer. She called again an hour later. And again at midnight. I finally answered at 1 a.m. What, Elena? Everyone is furious with you. Aunt Marie says you're not welcome at family events anymore. Uncle Tom says you've always been difficult. The cousins are posting on Facebook about how ungrateful you are. Okay, that's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? I don't care what they think. I don't care if they approve of me. I spent 34 years caring what Dad thought, what the family thought, trying to be good enough and small enough and quiet enough. I'm done. You're really going to throw away your entire family over this? They threw me away first, Elena, when I was poor and struggling and needed them. They just didn't notice until I stopped pretending I was fine. I lay back on my bed, staring at my ceiling. You still have a chance, you know. You could be my sister. You could acknowledge what happened and stand with me. Or you can keep choosing Dad and the family and their version of events. But you can't have both. That's not fair. Why do I have to choose? Because neutrality isn't neutral. Silence isn't silence. When you don't stand against injustice, you're supporting it. And I need you to decide if you're going to support me or support the man who stole from me. Elena was quiet for a long time. Then, I need to think about this. Take all the time you need. But Elena, while you're thinking, remember that I'm the one who got arrested at your wedding. I'm the one who's rebuilding her life, and I'm doing it with or without you." I hung up. The truth was, I didn't need Elena to choose me. I didn't need the family's approval. I didn't need my father's remorse. I had already won. I had my money, my house, my freedom. I had my children and my future and my self-respect. Everything else was just noise. My father was released from prison in November, 4 months early for good behavior. I found out from a Facebook post Elena made, a photo of her and Marcus picking him up from FCI Morgantown, his prison uniform replaced with civilian clothes, his face thinner than I remembered. The caption read, "Welcome home, Dad. Time to heal." I blocked her immediately. But the universe wasn't done with my father yet. 2 weeks after his release, I got a call from Margaret Chen. "Have you been following the news?" "What news?" "3 of your father's former clients have filed a class action lawsuit. Turns out the trust fraud wasn't limited to you. He'd been skimming from client accounts for years, covering it up by moving money between accounts. They found at least 7 other victims." I sat down slowly on my couch. "How much? Combined?" "Nearly $2 million. The state attorney general's office is getting involved. They're talking about new criminal charges, Rebecca. Federal charges this time. He could go back to prison for a decade, but he served his time for what he did to me. They can't charge him twice for the same crime. These are different crimes. Different victims, different accounts." Margaret's voice was grim. "Your case opened the door. Once the state bar started investigating, the whole house of cards collapsed. People started asking questions about their own accounts. An audit uncovered the rest. What happens now? Now your father tries to defend himself without any money, without a license, and without any credibility. His lawyer from the first case won't touch him again. He's going to have to use a public defender." I hung up and sat in silence for 10 minutes. Then I called Michael. "Did you hear about your dad?" "Yeah, it's all over the news. They're calling him a serial fraudster, a con artist who exploited the trust of elderly clients." Michael paused. "How are you feeling?" "Vindicated," I said honestly. I spent months wondering if I was overreacting, if I was being cruel, if maybe he really did mean well in some twisted way. But this proves he didn't. He was just a thief. A common thief who happened to be wearing a tie and calling himself a CPA. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I didn't attend, but I followed every news report. 7 victims testified, including an 82-year-old widow who'd lost her entire retirement account. A 70-year-old man with Parkinson's who'd trusted my father to manage his disability settlement. A young couple who'd inherited money from a deceased parent and watched it disappear. My father's defense was that he'd made accounting errors, that he'd intended to return the money eventually, that the stress of his first conviction had clouded his judgment. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and found him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. He was 63 years old. He'd be 75 when he got out, assuming he lived that long. Elena called me the day of sentencing. I answered this time. "Are you happy now?" she screamed. "Are you happy he's going to die in prison? Are you happy you destroyed him?" "I didn't destroy him, Elena. He destroyed himself. I just refused to lie about it. You could have helped him. You could have spoken up for him at the trial. You could have told them he wasn't a bad person, but he is a bad person. He stole from 8 people, Elena. 8 people who trusted him. 8 people whose lives he ruined for his own profit. Why would I lie about that? Because he's our father. He's your father. He stopped being mine the day he stole my inheritance, and he stopped being a decent human being long before that." I was in my kitchen making dinner for the kids. Emma was doing homework at the table. "Did you testify for him?" "Yes." I told them about his good qualities, about how he raised us alone after Mom died, about how he supported the church and volunteered in the community. Did it help? No. The judge said his community service made his betrayal worse, not better, that people had trusted him because of his reputation. The judge was right. I stirred pasta sauce, watching it bubble. "Elena, I need you to understand something. I'm not angry that Dad's going to prison. I'm not celebrating his suffering. I'm just not sorry about it. He had 16 years to do the right thing and give me my money. He had 16 years to be a decent father. He chose not to be. These are the consequences of his choices." "What about my choices?" Elena's voice broke. "What about the fact that I'm losing my father? That my kids will grow up without a grandfather? That I have to live with everyone knowing my dad is a criminal? Those are hard things. I'm sorry you're dealing with them. But they're not my responsibility, Elena. I didn't make Dad steal from people. I didn't make him lie and cheat and destroy lives. He did that. And you're mad at me because I'm the one who made you see what he really was. I can't do this anymore. Elena whispered. I can't keep fighting with you. Then don't. Make a choice and live with it. Choose Dad and accept that he's a criminal, or choose to see the truth and build a relationship with me. But I'm done being the bad guy in your story just because I refuse to be a victim in his. She hung up. I finished making dinner and called the kids to the table. They'd grown so much in the past year. Emma had joined the debate team. Jake had discovered a love of photography. They were happy, stable, secure. They didn't know their grandfather was going to federal prison. They didn't need to know. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch. The oak tree in the yard was losing its leaves, creating a carpet of gold and red. Michael's car pulled into the driveway. He'd started spending more evenings here after his classes, helping with homework and staying for dinner. Hey, he said, joining me on the porch. I heard about the sentencing. 12 years. How do you feel about that? I thought about it carefully. I feel like justice happened. Finally. After all these years, justice actually happened. Not because someone took pity on me or because I begged for it, but because the truth came out and couldn't be ignored. Do you think he'll ever understand what he did wrong? No. People like Dad don't see themselves as villains. He'll spend those 12 years thinking he's the victim, thinking I ruined his life instead of accepting that he ruined his own life. I sipped my wine. But that's not my problem anymore. Michael took my hand. I'm proud of you for standing up to him, for not backing down even when everyone told you to forgive and forget. I couldn't forget, and I wouldn't forgive. Not because I'm bitter or angry, but because forgiveness requires remorse, and Dad was never sorry for what he did. He was just sorry he got caught. We sat in comfortable silence watching the stars appear. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You've won. I hope it was worth it. My father, messaging from prison. I showed Michael. He squeezed my hand. Are you going to respond? I thought about all the things I could say, all the ways I could hurt him back, make him understand what he'd taken from me. But in the end, none of it mattered. He didn't deserve my words. He didn't deserve my time. He didn't deserve anything from me. I blocked the number and deleted the text. No, I said. I'm not going to respond. He's already taken enough of my life. He doesn't get another second. The next morning, I got an email from Aunt Marie. The subject line read, "You should be ashamed." The email detailed everything I'd done wrong, how I'd torn apart the family, how I'd sent my father to prison, how I'd refused to show mercy or compassion, how I'd become a bitter, vengeful person who valued money more than family. I read it once, felt nothing, and deleted it. Then I opened my banking app and transferred $50,000 into each of my children's college savings accounts. Transferred $20,000 to Michael so he could finish his engineering degree without working. Transferred $10,000 to a domestic violence shelter in my mother's name. The rest I kept, invested safely, earning interest. My father had spent 16 years growing my money while keeping it from me. Now I was doing what he'd never allowed me to do. I was using it to build something real, something that would last beyond his reach. That afternoon, I drove to my mother's grave for the first time in years. I brought yellow roses, her favorite. I sat by her headstone and told her everything. About Dad's theft, about the trial, about the house and the kids and Michael going back to school, about how I'd finally stopped being afraid. I wish you were here, I said to the granite marker. I wish you could see what I've built. But I think you'd be proud. I think you'd be glad I didn't let him break me. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees. A bird sang somewhere nearby, and for the first time since I was 15 years old, I felt my mother's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. I'd survived, more than survived. I'd won, and my father would spend the next 12 years knowing it. 5 years later, I stood in the audience at Michael's graduation ceremony and watched him accept his engineering degree. At 40, he was the oldest graduate in his class, but his grin was the brightest. Our kids, 14 now, cheered so loudly that people turned to look, smiling at their enthusiasm. Michael had a job lined up at a civil engineering firm, starting salary $75,000. Not enough to make us rich. But combined with my income as the grocery store's regional manager and the careful investments I'd made, we were comfortable. More than comfortable. Secure. We weren't remarried. We'd talked about it, but decided against it. What we had was better than marriage. A partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals, without the legal entanglement that had once trapped us together in poverty. We were co-parents, friends, sometimes more than friends. It was enough. Elena and I hadn't spoken in 4 years. The last conversation had been a voicemail she'd left on Emma's 13th birthday. I can't believe you won't let me be part of my niece and nephew's lives. You're punishing them for Dad's mistakes. I deleted it without responding. My children didn't need an aunt who thought forgiveness was more important than justice. They didn't need family members who would teach them that abuse should be tolerated if it came from someone you loved. My father was still in prison. I knew because occasionally I'd see news articles about the restitution payments. He'd been ordered to pay back all 8 victims, but with no income and no assets, the payments came in tiny increments. $20 here, $50 there, garnished from his prison work wages. At his current rate, he'd be paying until he was 112 years old. I felt nothing about this. Not satisfaction, not pity, nothing. The twins were thriving. Emma wanted to be a lawyer, to help people who get stolen from, like you did, Mom. Jake was interested in architecture. They were kind kids, thoughtful kids, who volunteered at the local food bank because they remembered what it felt like to be hungry. 3 months after Michael's graduation, I got a letter forwarded from Aunt Marie's address. The return address was FCI Terre Haute, my father. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. Rebecca, I'm dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I have 6 months at most. I've been denied compassionate release because of the nature of my crimes. I know you won't believe me, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry I took what was yours. I'm sorry I watched you suffer. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did. I understand that I destroyed your life because I couldn't stand the thought of you being independent. I couldn't stand the idea that you might not need me. Your mother would be ashamed of me. She trusted me to take care of you, and I betrayed that trust every day for 16 years. I'm not asking to see you or the kids. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I know what I am, what I became. I hope you're happy. I hope you built a good life. I hope my grandchildren never have to know what their grandfather did. I'm sorry, even though it doesn't matter. Even though it's too late. I'm sorry. Dad. I read the letter 3 times. Then I walked to my fireplace and burned it. Emma found me there, watching the paper curl and blacken. What was that? She asked. Nothing important, I said. Just old business that's finally finished. Are you okay, Mom? I pulled her into a hug. I'm perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect. My father died 4 months later. Elena called to tell me. I was at work, doing inventory in the stockroom. He's gone, she said, her voice hollow. He died last night in the prison infirmary. They're releasing his body to me for burial. I'm sorry for your loss, I said automatically. That's it? That's all you have to say? What else do you want me to say, Elena? I'm sorry you lost your father, but I lost mine 16 years ago when I found out he'd been stealing from me. The man who died last night was just someone I used to know. He asked about you at the end. He wanted to know if you were happy. And what did you tell him? I told him yes, that you seemed happy, that you'd built a good life. Elena's voice cracked. He smiled when I said that, like it was the only thing that mattered. Maybe it was, I said. Maybe in the end he understood that the best thing he ever did for me was get caught. You're so cold. You've become so cold. No, I've become honest. There's a difference. I checked my clipboard, marking off cases of cereal. Are you having a funeral? Saturday at 2, St. Michael's. You're welcome to come. I won't be there. He was your father, Rebecca. No, he was the man who created me. Father implies something more, something he never earned. I set down my clipboard. Elena, I don't wish you pain. I don't wish you suffering. But I also don't owe him my grief. I buried the person I thought he was a long time ago. This is just making it official. I hung up and went back to inventory. Saturday came and went. I spent it at Jake's soccer game and Emma's debate tournament. Michael grilled burgers that evening while I made potato salad. We ate on the back porch while the kids talked about their day. That night, I got a group text from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins, aunts, uncles. Your father's funeral was beautiful. You should have been there. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Sunday morning, I drove to my mother's grave and placed yellow roses by her headstone. He's gone, I told her. Dad died, and I feel nothing. Is that wrong? Should I feel sad? The wind moved through the trees. A cardinal landed on a nearby branch, bright red against the green leaves. I think you'd understand, I continued. I think you'd know that I mourned him a long time ago. I mourned the father I thought I had, the father who turned out to be a fantasy. The real man, I don't miss him. I don't mourn him. I'm just relieved. I sat by her grave for an hour, watching the clouds move across the sky. When I finally left, I felt lighter, free. The last thread connecting me to my father's destruction had finally been cut. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the federal prison system. My father's personal effects, a watch, a wedding ring, a few photos, were being released to next of kin. Was I interested in claiming them? I wrote back, "Please donate or dispose of all items. I have no interest in his possessions." Elena called me furious. "Those were Dad's things, our inheritance. How could you just give them away? Because they're worthless to me. Because I don't want anything that belonged to him. Because I already took what was mine, and I'm not interested in his scraps." You're unbelievable. You got your money, you won. Why are you still so angry? I'm not angry, Elena. I'm just done. There's a difference. I was in my kitchen, cooking dinner for my family. Real dinner with fresh vegetables and good meat and dessert. I'm not carrying anger around. I'm not plotting revenge. I'm just living my life without him in it. That's not anger. That's peace. It doesn't look like peace to me. That's because you're still trying to grieve a man who never existed. You're mourning the father you wanted him to be, not the father he was. I already did that grieving, Elena. I did it years ago when I found out the truth. I'm past it now. She hung up on me. 1 year later, Emma got early acceptance to Stanford with a full academic scholarship. Jake was being recruited by 3 different colleges for his photography portfolio. Michael had been promoted to senior engineer. I'd been offered a position as director of operations for the entire grocery chain. We celebrated at a restaurant I would have never been able to afford 6 years ago. The wine was good. The food was excellent. My kids laughed and joked and made plans for their futures. Big, wonderful plans that didn't include compromise or sacrifice or choosing between necessities. To Mom, Emma said, raising her glass of sparkling cider, "For never giving up, for fighting back, for showing us that we're worth fighting for." We clinked glasses. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. That night, lying in bed, I thought about my father's letter, the apology he'd written from his deathbed, the sorry that came 16 years too late. I'd told Emma I'd burned it because it was old business that was finished, but the truth was simpler than that. I'd burned it because sorry wasn't magic. Sorry didn't give me back my 20s or my marriage or my children's sense of security. Sorry didn't erase 16 years of deliberate cruelty. Sorry didn't rebuild what he'd destroyed. I'd had to do that myself, without his help, without his permission, without his blessing. And I had. I'd rebuilt my life from ashes. I'd turned my pain into power. I'd transformed my suffering into strength. I'd taken every terrible thing he'd done to me and used it as fuel to become someone better, someone stronger, someone he could never control again. That was my revenge, not his imprisonment, not his death, not his suffering. My revenge was being happy, was thriving, was building the exact life he'd tried to prevent me from having. My revenge was succeeding despite him. And late at night, in the house I'd bought with the money he'd stolen, surrounded by the family I'd protected from his poison, I smiled, because I'd won, not by destroying him. He'd destroyed himself, but by refusing to let him destroy me. And that victory was sweeter than any revenge I could have planned.